Is everybody almost ready?
We have a quorum. In case you're wondering,
I was going to ask,
we're only missing Director Chapman.
is he called in or anything?
I've not heard from him.
No? Okay.
Heard from who?
Director Chapman.
No, Kermit said he's not gonna be here.
He's not going to be here.
No,
Who's not?
Kermit said Doug isn't gonna be here. Kermit said Doug isn't gonna be here.
Doug is not going to be here.
Yeah.
We'll just get the people out of the kitchen and we'll be good to go.
Just hold on a second.
We're just waiting for a couple more board members to take their seats.
Sorry, that I'm not there today due to the inclement wind, which has had no ferries running.
I think that was just poor planning. If you would have came in a week ago and got a hotel, you should have been okay.
Why didn't I think of that?
I don't know. You folks online, are you still okay with reading your bylaws and so on and so forth?
Yep.
You can't make it.
Yes, if I refer to you? Okay, good.
Do we show up bright and clear in front of you there, Chair?
You
Your new
do,
screen?
you do.
Turn that off.
Okay, we have confirmation of quorum. We're going to call the meeting to order. We will acknowledge that we are located on the traditional territory of the Lakotach people. Adoption of the agenda. Go ahead, Councillor Dahl. Councillor Dahl.
I'd like to move to defer item 16 on the agenda to the November meeting.
I'll second that.
Further discussion?
Let me just see what 16 is.
Chair, could you, I'm curious why we're moving to defer it?
Just Director Dahl make the motion to-
Councillor Dahl, or Director Dahl?
Because I won't be here by the time that item gets up on the agenda, and I'd like to hear the debate around it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none? Opposed? Sorry, we got two opposed? Three? Who do we got opposed? Director Von Esch, Director Lotz opposed, Director Mowini's opposed, and Director Wally's opposed. Okay, so 4 opposed. The motion is carried. Okay. So for the agenda for our October 30th, 2024, be adopted as amended. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. No petition delegations today. Adoption of minutes.
So moved.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Business arising? None. Public considerations? None. Notice of motions? None. Chair's report. Remembrance Day wreath ceremony having to be held in Campbell River, at the Spirit Square on November 11th. Standard protocol dictates that the chair or the vice chair represent the regional district at public events. However, if the other directors are occasionally called upon, when the chair's availability is an issue. Area Director D is often represented the regional district when the chair and the vice chair have been unavailable to attend. So,
I'm available. I do recommend from my experience last year that we talk to the Legion because they didn't announce the SRD's wreath laying like they did the other communities.
okay, so you're available to go?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Also, we have a Christmas event coming up on December 11th. It's going to include a buffet dinner, comedian, and a casino night at the Coast Discovery Inn. I hope you can all make it. Regretfully, I will not be able to make it. I'll be out. So, but it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. So it'll happen right after the regular board meeting. Okay? Any questions on that? No?
Mr. will staff to know the RSVP on that? Yeah, good.
Okay. So I need a motion to receive my report.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Who made that motion? Director Colburn. Committee Chair Report, Strathcona Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Committee.
I'll move that the draft minutes of the regular meeting of the Strathcona Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Committee held on October 7th, 2024 be received.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Director Davis. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Electoral Area Service Committee.
Move received.
Director Wally.
Second.
Director Rice. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Municipal Service Committee.
Move receipt.
That was Director Sinnott. Director Kerr. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. School District 72 Liaison Committee.
Move receipt.
That was Director Von Esch, I believe.
Second.
Director Wally, second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is, passed. Committee of the Whole. That the draft minutes from the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole held October 17, 2024 be received.
Move receipt.
Director Colburn?
Second.
Director Sinnott, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Are you opposed, Director Von Esch?
Nope, I'm in favor.
Thank you. Motion is carried. Okay, so we're at staff reports. Request for subdivision frontage.
Move receipt of the report.
Second.
Director Sinnott, Director Colburn, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
I'll move
B,
that the board approve frontage relief for proposed Lot 1 as shown on the plan of subdivision attached to the October 9th, 2024 report from the CAO.
Second.
thank you. Director Wally, second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. EASC, Development Permit Application. Report from the CAO be received.
Move receipt.
Second.
Director Rice, Director Colburn, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B,
Like to move item B, that the floodplain setback of 10 meters be approved for proposed dwelling on Lot 10, Section 34, Township 4, Comox District Plan 38278.
Second.
Second.
Director Wally, second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
Like to move item C, that the floodplain and geotechnical assessments attached to the October 9th, 2024 staff report form part of the required Section 219 covenant to be registered against title, and that the chair and corporate officer be authorized to execute the required Section 219 covenant prior to issuance of a building permit.
Director Wally, second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
Like to move item D, that the environmentally sensitive area development permit for foreshore and watercourse as attached in the October 9th, 2024 staff report be approved, and that the corporate officer be authorized to issue the permit upon registration of the Section 219 covenant.
Director Wally, second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Rice.
Like to move receipt of the report from the Chief Administration Officer be received.
Second.
Second.
Director Wally, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
Like to move item B, that the report be prepared on the feasibility of upgrading the bus stops at Shelter Bay Resort and at Ingalls Road Waterside to include concrete pads, and that the report address the cost of installing 2 more transit shelters.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Director Wally, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Area D,
Like to move that the report from the Chief Administration Officer be received.
Second.
Director Wally, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B,
Like to move item B, that a report be prepared for discussion at the Electoral Area Services Committee on the emergency preparedness plans for Electoral Area D, including evacuation routes should Highway 19A become unnavigable.
second.
I'll second.
Second.
Director Senate, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Village Bay Lake Telephone Services, report from the
Move receipt of the
CAO.
report.
Thank you.
Second.
Director Wally, second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B,
I'll move that a report with options for providing reliable telephone service to the Village Bay Lakes area on Quadra Island be prepared for consideration by the Electoral Area Services Committee, including, if possible, the reinstatement of the recently discontinued TELUS payphone service.
Second.
Director Wally, second. Discussion? Director Senate.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'm just curious, I'm not sure what the underlying community group had done in terms of making inquiries to TELUS and whether they had any information as to the regulatory authority that TELUS has for reducing service. Having been in the telephone business for years myself, I know they're highly regulated, and there'd probably be some CRTC decisions on decommissioning of payphones. Do we know anything?
If I can, Mr. Chair, TELUS has done this in a couple other communities, and I don't know if there's any regulations to force them to keep the phones active, but with community pushback, they, I believe they kept the phones there. They didn't remove them. So We'll look into if there's a requirement for them to keep it. I don't know, but they haven't really given communities heads up. And so these have come forward when the community realizes that the phones are being removed. And so see if we can advocate in any way to have the phones either stay there or being reinstated.
So from my experience, anything that you do with a regulated telco, if you copy the commission who regulates them, you'll get immediate reply, just as a tip.
Director Colburn.
Thank you, Director Sinnott, for that information. We've been fighting this fight for a very long time. We have payphones in the community, and they've continuously put a notification on the payphone, not notified the local government that they're going to take them out. In a space like ours, where there is quite often power outages, there's no cell service, the Wi-Fi goes down. These are key pieces and safety considerations to have. As far out as Village Bay is, and as far out as we are, it's a real safety concern. So thank you for that. And any advocacy that you do, if you could let us know, that would be great. We're in the same kind of situation, so.
So far, we've been successful in lobbying for Roberts Lake's cell phone. So far, we've been successful having it remain. They're talking about taking out the payphone and having a 911 service there. But however, that doesn't help you in your community for having a 911 service when people just need to call out. But squeaky wheel. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Pub to Pub Trail. That the report from the CAO be received.
Move receipt.
Second.
Second.
Director Wally, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. That a report prepared for discussion at the Electoral Area Service Committee in the matter of regional district signs for a pub-to-pub trail, also known as Jack Hames Trail. Do I have a motion, please?
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Sorry?
We've already received the report. So the motion is for a report.
I think he meant that the report be done.
Thank you. Okay, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? See none, motion is carried. Director Mawhinney.
Yes, Chair. I will move that the Old Growth Forest Management Quadra Island report from the CAO be received.
Thank you. Director Wally, second. Discussion? All in favor? Oh, discussion, sorry. Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. I know this is a big agenda, and I just wasn't sure if everyone had a chance to read over the reports that are attached to this item, so I wanted to provide a little context for the motion which follows. The Forest Practices Board is an independent watchdog on the forest industry of BC, and recently they released a report which is titled Management of Old Forests on Quadra Island. A news release that regarding their report states that an investigation into a complaint has found that the management of old forests on Quadra Island needs to be improved to ensure enough old forests will be present on the island in the future. And it continues to say that while we found that each of the licensees did not comply with some aspect of forestry legislation, the bigger issue is that no one is responsible for monitoring or ensuring that Quadra Island's old forests are conserved or that enough mature forests are protected from logging so they can develop into old forests in the future. And the report's conclusion is that no one in the provincial government considers it their responsibility to ensure that recruitment strategies are in place where a deficit of old forests exists. And the report also points to the forest landscape plans as the solution to the issue, but that those are not planned for Quadra Island in the short term. So I'm hoping that the board will understand the importance of advocating for this because to me, it's really similar to the issue that we had with Zabalis recently that we've been advocating for, where something sort of falls between the cracks of different ministries, and it's unclear where the advocacy can even be placed. So that's what this motion that is here on the board agenda is regarding. Thanks.
Okay, still on receipt? All in favor? Susan, Director Sinnott?
Yeah, I'm going to have a subsequent, depending on whether or not item B is put forward. And I'm just going to say that my intention is to move it on to the Resource Committee for further comment before we come back. The other one is just awareness that the Forest Services or the Forest Practices Board may have done a comprehensive report, but there is still time left for Timber West to reply, so it's not complete in terms of the response, nor is there any mention on the Indigenous oversight. From my understanding, Weewakai work closely with Mosaic in terms of what's happening on the island, and it's a big missing piece here, and I don't want to move too quickly on option B. Thanks.
Okay, still on receipt? All in favor? No?
Chair,
Sorry,
if I
Director
may.
Mawhinney?
Thank you, and thank you to Director Stinnett for those comments. I'm aware that the Weewakai Nation is working closely with Mosaic, and I'm grateful for that. And really, the motion that you see here is to write to the Ministry of Forests and the Ministry of Waterlands and Natural Resources, which are just to highlight the clarity for the provincial responsibility, because why this has fallen through the cracks and why the Forest Practices Board has written this report is because currently, for some reason, Quadra Island is in this sort of like anomalous position where, although there's a provincial requirement for 9% recruitment or retention of old forests, there's like 1% on Quadra Island. So perhaps we should add the Weewakai Nation to the motion so that they are also aware of the concerns that we have about ensuring that the provincial recommendations are being followed.
Okay, we're still on receipt. So all in favor of receipt? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B, Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move that the board write a letter to the Minister of Forests, the Minister of Water, Lands and Natural Resource Stewardship, and BC's Chief Forester, highlighting concerns with old forest management on Quadra Island, the need for clarity on provincial responsibility for recruitment of old forests in landscape units with a deficit, and the immediate need for forest landscape planning on Quadra Island to ensure recruitment and retention of adequate mature forest to meet provincial targets.
Director Wally, second. Discussion? Director Sinnott?
Well, perhaps I'll let Director Mawhinney speak first because it is her motion.
Go ahead, Director
Thank you,
Mawhinney.
Chair. Thank you, Chair. And I am aware of the thought that Director Sinnott had regarding adding the Weewakai Nation. I'm also really mindful of the Weewakai Nation's response to Strathcona Regional District referrals. When we refer them almost anything, the response is generally that they only respond to provincial referrals or federal referrals. So in this case, I think that they are a higher level of government, and it's more appropriate for them to be in discussions with the province about this. And that's where I would hope that the province would go and discuss this with the nations. Thank you.
Director Sinnott.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of this motion. I think it's premature. I think we have to, in addition, move it to our Indigenous Relations Committee as well as to our Natural Resources Committee for consideration of the proper handling of the Forest Practices Board response, and we better be consulting with Weewakai, who are directly impacted by this. So I'll vote against it.
Any other discussion? So all in favor? 2, 3, 4. Opposed? The motion's defeated. Could you put up your hands again, the opposed? Director Sinnott, Director Kerr, Director Lanyon, Director Dahl.
Oh, are we opposed?
Opposed.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Director Colburn, Director Rice. Okay,
I think,
I'm sorry,
I think Susan has a follow-up.
do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to make a motion that we refer the report from the CAO on this matter to both the Resource Committee and the Indigenous Relations Committee for further comment on appropriate follow-up and reporting back to the board with their recommendations.
Second.
Director Colburn, discussion. Director Colburn.
And I'm hoping that what would come out of that is the proper protocol, the proper way, the timelines for those responses that are due to come, so that we can get a really good handle on appropriateness, like I said, timeline, and how to move this forward in a way that respects the broad spectrum of stakeholders that are in this, in the report, as well as the provincial parties that are, or the provincial ministries that are concerned.
Thank you. Director Wally.
Yeah, just to point out to the board, of course, directors are always free to write their own letter to the minister to represent their own area and their own area's concerns. So I'd recommend that Director Mawhinney do that.
Any other discussion? Director Jack?
Yes, thank you. No, this is a big issue, and I think that would go to the First Nations Committee. This is something that Kaikateksa has just gone through, and we've developed in our land use plan. So be interesting to see where this goes. I don't know if anybody's aware, but we've just acquired the tenure for, excuse me, my mind's lost right now, for international forest products in the Kaikateksa territory. So it's a large area. I mean, aside from the parks we have in our area, we're doing an assessment on what's left for old growth in our area, and it's ongoing right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Davis?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make the point that in the case of the Village of Tassus, we were interested in what was going on around our community. And we worked directly with Mochop Mushlet First Nation and the local logging company to come to an agreement on what areas were going to be set aside and what areas going to be allowed for recruitment. And then we went to the provincial government directly. So that was our process. Just a suggestion. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Von Esch, were you opposed?
Yeah.
Thank you. Director Mawhinney, Q Cove.
The Kwathiaski Cove Sewer System Rights of Way. I would move that the report from the Chief Administrative Officer is received.
Second.
Director Colburn, second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B, Director Mawhinney.
I'll move that the chair and corporate officer be authorized to execute the statutory right-of-way agreements with owners of properties along Pidcock Road regarding access to the Kwathiaski Cove Sewer Works.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Director Wally, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Von Esch.
Cortez Island Multi-Use Sports Courts, move that the report from the CAO be received.
Second.
Director Mawhinney, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Is on receipt? Go ahead.
I'll move that a report on providing $50,000 of community works funding for the building of a multi-use sports court on the Southern Cortez Community Association's property be prepared for further consideration by the Electoral Area Services Committee.
Second.
Second.
Director Wally, discussion? All to Director Sinnott.
Yeah, I just want to hear a bit more as to, a little bit more about the staffing requirements and the use of the Community Works Fund with respect to a specified recreational project like this. If staff can give me any idea of how common this is, or if this is sort of traditional use, and how that affects the regional development of recreation.
I think I can answer that, Mr. Chair. So recreation in itself is allowable for the Community Works Funds, but there's a number of new rules and complications with non-government organizations in terms of ongoing management, operational funds, asset management, land ownership, et cetera. So as well with the new Community Works Fund rules, it cannot replace another piece of infrastructure that the regional district either has or has on its list of infrastructure upgrades. For example, if you have a series of recreation infrastructure projects that you're not providing gas tax in lieu of a project that competes for it, like let's say a non-government organization, that would be a conflict. So there's a number of new rules with the Community Works Funds that I'm going to say are going to likely complicate this request, but we'll bring back a staff report identifying those challenges.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director Von Esch.
Cortez Island Land and Home Ownership, I move that the report from the CAO be received.
Second.
Director Mawhinney. Discussion? All in favor? Oh, sorry, Director Von Esch.
Sure, I was just going to give a little bit more context. So this is really just sort of the initial stages of starting to explore some affordable land ownership opportunities on Cortez, which is basically taking a chunk of the Cortez Housing Society land and making 10 or 15 small lots on it, putting power, water, and sewage into it, and then selling it to people during as a long-term lease that would keep the land affordable in perpetuity and allow people to build on it. And just looking for sort of that first step and conversations to start happening.
Director Sinnott.
I have a question. Who is going to be granting these leases? Is the SRD going to have any part of it, or are they just participating in sort of a partnership? What is this?
I think if this is just starting the conversation and having a conversation with the Cortez Housing Society, it is on their land, but it's really just getting the conversation going and exploring the idea.
Okay, I'll have questions on the second motion.
Okay, all in favor on receipt? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B.
Move that the regional district work with the Cortez Housing Society to develop a plan for a short-term loan through the Regional Housing Service so that the Cortez Housing Society can develop a part of its land with power, water, septic, and road access to facilitate long-term lease agreements and thus create affordable housing opportunities on Cortez Island.
Second.
Director Mawhinney, discussion? Director Sinnott?
I have a question, Chair.
Sure, one moment,
believe
please.
as
Were you?
I thought as the seconder you got to speak first, but
I'll defer to
Go ahead,
Director.
Director Mawhinney.
thank you, Chair. I'm curious from staff the likely timeline on the report and if it would be returned in time for the board to consider the request's inclusion in the 2025 financial plan.
Well, that's tricky. So it says engage discussions. I have no idea, what those discussions will lead to or what the term or what the thought process in terms of it is. So, we can have a discussion, they can have a quick ask, and I can bring that to the board. But it's tough. I don't know what kind of model they're looking at in terms of lease. The motion says a short-term loan. So I think that I don't really know what that means. So I can bring something back as preliminary to high-level thoughts about what the society has in mind and bring that to the board, likely, hopefully, before the end of the year. There's only 2 meetings left before the end of the year. And give the board some kind of line of sight on what they're thinking about, because I don't know at this point what their plan is or what the plan would be.
Thank you.
Director Sinnott?
When we create a housing service, does it include the power to grant loans?
Well, that's also tricky. I don't know if it's just even through the service to grant loans, but I'm going to say it's highly unlikely that the regional district would offer a loan to society without any security. That would create a significant amount of liability. I'm not saying that that's what they're asking for. I haven't had any discussions, but let's say the development was, they needed $3 million loan through the regional district. That would create a great deal of risk and vulnerability to the regional district if there is no secured asset to that loan. So are we going to loan $3 million to an organization to build something, and then presumably I don't know what the payback terms of that would be, but are we talking about security? I don't know.
Well, thank you, staff, on this. I'm just curious about staff capacity and coming in with an innovative thing. I would prefer if the Cortez Housing Society wanted to do a delegation, present to us and explain to us how they've exhausted their options, including going to BC Housing, which seems to me the place you go for this type of funding, and shows that they've met the requirements and how they're going to provide housing that goes within the requirements for the provincial funder. I'm not sure if I would appreciate our staff working on this right now. I mean, we have a lot of other things that we need to get through. I'm going to vote against it.
Director Von Esch, then Director Lanyon.
Yeah, just to give a little more context here, I think obviously the land would be would back any loan, and sort of the initial discussions that I've had is they're, sort of looking for like, $1 million to put power, water, and sewage into 10 lots, sell those 10 lots in a long-term lease for, let's say, $100,000. That would pay back the loan. So that's what the motion refers to as far as short-term, which probably isn't the actual definition, would be more of a medium term. But looking to sort of really minimize any tax requisition attached to this and make sure it works for everybody. And again, really, this is just the first step in having a discussion and seeing what's possible and bring something back to the board that we can discuss further.
Director Lanyon.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so just for clarity, I read this motion as a request for permission to deploy SRD staff to do some investigative work alongside the Cortez Housing Society. This would be planning staff?
I think it would be myself.
Okay. Yeah, because I suppose there's a bunch of different ways to do this. I would, just efficiency-wise, I would be interested in, freeing up a little bit of resource to just see if it's feasible, and then kill it if it's not. But it sounds like they have a back of the napkin outline of where it could go. Might take an hour for you to to see, right?
I think, if I can, Mr. Chair, I think, in a single meeting, I could probably, knowing the hurdles, challenges, what maybe the likelihood of the board, I think I could determine whether it has some life or not and bring that back to the board after a single meeting.
Well, we all want more affordable housing, and if this doesn't cost us anything to accomplish that, then I have no objections.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Director Sinnott? The motion is carried. Director Von Esch, number 11.
A lot of Cortez happening here. Number 11, Cortez Island Advisory Planning Commission, move that the report from the CAO be received.
Second.
There was Director Wally. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B.
And I'm going to move alternative B on this, after checking in with staff and knowing that APCs are confirmed every January, that it makes more sense to have them appointed for January rather than right now. So I'll move that Romney Shipway, Bruce Ellingson, Amy Robertson, Kevin PC, Michael O'Donnell, Kai Harvey, Amy Bachner, Kate Madigan, and Elijah McKenty be appointed to the Electoral Area B Cortez Island Advisory Planning Committee effective January 1st, 2025.
Director Wally?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. C,
I'll move that a report on possible changes to the terms of reference for the Cortez Island Advisory Planning Commission bylaw be prepared for review by the Electoral Area Services Committee.
Director Wally, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Director
Number 12,
Vanesh.
Cortez Island Community Hall funding. I move that the report from the CAO be received. I think it might be Robin's dog.
Oh, okay. Director Wally, second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B,
I'll move that the chair and corporate officer be authorized to execute the modification agreements for the Cortez Island Community Halls as attached to the October 23rd, 2024 report from the CAO.
Director Wally, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. 13, the SPARC BC accessibility training. The report from the CAO be received.
So moved.
Thank you. Renee?
Good
Discussion?
afternoon, Chair and Directors. The report before you is to consider a recommendation from the Strathcona Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Committee to submit an application to fund an education and awareness program. This project is an initiative to help bring greater awareness of disabilities and accessibility through educating public servants. You may recall that the Accessibility BC Act requires all public organizations to have a committee, a plan, and to work towards implementation of that plan. And during the creation of the Strathcona Accessibility Plan, 30% of the barriers that were identified were categorized as attitudinal. And to respond to those attitudinal barriers and to assist in removing them, an awareness training program is proposed. This accessibility and awareness program would be available for all staff and elected officials throughout the regional district, the member municipalities, and the other regional partners, and would have an impact of training more than 700 people and having a more informed public service. Spark BC is administering provincial funds to support the implementation and priorities identified in accessibility plans, and there's a funding available for up to $25,000. This project would be funded could be funded through that Spark BC grant. The grant application requires the endorsement of the Strathcona Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Committee, and that was received earlier this October at their October meeting, and their recommendation is before you today.
Thank you. Any questions for Renee? No? Director Lanyon?
Yeah, so what would be the tangible results and also the resource consumption of, say, staff time diversion while doing this training?
We anticipate that the training program would be 20 minutes to 30 minutes once completed, and it would be rolled out to all staff and then be on an ongoing onboarding for all staff, and the other member municipalities would do the same. So staff time to create this project would be, getting into contracts with a provider who could develop the program and just doing reports and reporting back to the Accessibility Committee, who would also have some input on the training program.
Okay, I'm still gun shy from the last one in terms of what because when it's a grant that is being pushed at us by the province, I think we have to squint at it a little bit and not just take it as free money. I want more comments, though. I don't want to be the only lone dog on this one.
Director Mawhinney, then Director Kerr, and then Director
Thank you,
Sinnott.
Chair. I have a couple of comments. One of them was that I noticed that it's an on-demand program, which will be available for staff and elected officials. I would ask if there had been consideration to providing an in-person learning opportunity, perhaps at a committee of the whole. You're saying it's only 20 or 30 minutes, because that would make the information publicly accessible to everybody and not just staff and electeds. And the other, that was sort of more comment, and the next is really a question, because the report says that the grant application can provide up to $25,000 for the training and awareness. And it also says that the quotes for the development of the program are in the range of $30,000 to $37,000, and that funding above the grant amount would be sourced from partner organizations. So I'm curious which partner organizations the report is referring to. Have there been concrete offers of support from these partnering organizations? And I'm asking because I'm wondering if this could potentially mean that the SRD is responsible for costs above the $25,000 being applied for, or more, depending on the amount of funding that we actually receive.
Go ahead.
To address the funding piece, the SRD does have a small budget for implementing the accessibility and hosting the accessibility committee meetings, and which leaves us $7,000, I think, between $30,000 and $37,000. And I have had conversations with the city of Campbell River, who would be able to support funding towards the project. And in addition, when needed, we do have agreements and MOUs with all the partnering organizations for up to $3,000 a year to provide support for the accessibility committee. So there are options. In addition, if some of our other member municipalities are also applying to this fund, they can redirect some of the funds if they're not using the full $25,000 to a regional project.
Thank you, Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. And like Director Lanyon, I'm a little gun shy on these grants, and we tend to think that we're dealing with old ladies and people in wheelchairs and that sort of thing. But there's a DEI nonsense kind of crammed into these, especially coming from our senior governments, that I'm really suspicious of, and I wouldn't support. So, I mean, it's all one thing to get free money, but as we know, there's no such thing as free money. Stuff comes with it. And so I'm kind of iffy on this whole thing, and encouraging these, anti-bias training. That has, when I hear terminology like that, my back goes up. And there's too much of that kind of nonsense in government these days. And free money, certainly they get you to do their work for you.
Director Sinnott, then Director Lanyon.
Yeah, I'm chair of this committee, and it's a bit of an eye-opener in terms of the diverse needs, particularly for the neurodivergent population. So I think this is really useful for staff, because a lot of the first-time people input and interact with either us or our staff here at the regional district or at the city have to be brought up to the awareness levels of the various issues that people have when they're accessing and have impairments or different ways of seeing the world. So they could be autistic, they could have sensitivities to light, they could have inabilities to hear properly and process information, and they often run into very negative experiences which further isolate and make their ability to access the world. So having sat on that committee and having a group of people who have very different capacities, I think it's important that we push that information out to our staff and to the people here, just so they have a feeling of understanding. There's a hidden group of people that we rarely interact with, and there's reasons why that is the case. So that 30% in terms of attitudinal issues is important, I think, to address. So I'm in support.
Director Lanyon?
Yeah, okay, so we get 25,000 to develop a communications system, I guess, is that how you describe it? Like a web widget or a video series?
Yeah, it would essentially be a video series with some questions that someone would answer as they navigate through the course.
Okay, and then so ongoing costs, like in theory, staff would need to maintain the links and perhaps at some point update the materials. That would not be covered in this initial 25,000, I assume.
That's correct. I think this type of training program would have some shelf life, and one of our partners, the Vancouver Island Regional Library, has stepped up to help host and navigate the hosting of the material and the training programs.
This doesn't seem so bad. Thanks.
Okay, Director Davis?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. One of my counselors actually sits on this accessibility committee, and I realize, like, I've always been very cognizant of accessibility and disability issues. And just in discussions with her, I realized how much I don't know, and whereas I thought I did. And I feel like I have a greater knowledge of disability than a lot of people do, because my younger brother is also disabled. But I think there's a lot of room for people to learn from this. We're only talking about $25,000, and I think it's important that this moves forward, given that the government is currently bringing in accessibility legislation based on input from all of our regions of BC. So I will support it. Thanks.
Okay, additional discussion on receipt? Director Kerr?
Thank you, Chair. A number of years ago, I was heavily involved in working with addictive people and also trying to find services for them. And I did an exercise one day, dressed like I am. I decided that this was going to be the day that I was going to ask for help from my addiction. And I proceeded that day to approach all of the agencies in town, counseling agencies, government agencies. I went around to all of them, walked in the door, and sort of gauged, as a white male, what kind of response I was getting, whether that response was one that was going to encourage me to stay there and go ahead. And I'm going to report to you that at the end of the day, I had walked out of every one of the offices. That there was an obstacle to addiction, somebody seeking addiction in every one of those buildings. And these are all agencies, a lot of government agencies, a lot of counseling agencies that all profess to be out there to help addiction. And, I think that there is, a lot of, it's easy when somebody is crippled or blind or, something that's really visual. But for a normal guy that is seeking help for addiction, I think that is one area that is a blind spot for a lot of these programs and a lot of these agencies. And I think, you can see that in the statistics for overdose deaths by males, both in BC and Canada. Men in the trades, just normal blue-collar guys are overly represented. So, I think that these are good ideas, but I think there needs to be some attention brought to just one huge chunk of people that are being overlooked.
Thank you. Any other discussion? On receipt, all in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. B, that the application submitted for $25,000 grant from the Spark BC Local Community Accessibility Grant Program to be developed and accessibility education and awareness program.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Director Colburn, second. Discussion? Director Lanyon?
Sorry, again, me. In our report, we've got some like province of BC letterhead information in tables. Is there any additional information, like criteria that are more detailed than this, or instructions? I just want to know that we're seeing everything you can see.
Yeah, I think this is the application guidelines, and there may be a more detailed application as instructions as you work through the grant. But yeah, this is pretty much what you would find on the web to know to apply.
Any other discussion? Director Colburn?
And I really appreciate the regional district's leadership on this, and the I know that there is a requirement that we all have these, that this is something that's been rolled out from the government, and the availability of the SRD to apply for grants like this and do this on behalf of some of the municipalities that may not have a capacity to do so, while having people from all around the region on the committee, and talking about these things is a really important step. So thank you for that.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Number 14, Councilor Access and Management, report of the CAO be received. Thank you. Second, Director Rice. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the regional district apply for funding through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to assist with natural asset management.
Second.
Director Rice, second. Discussion? Director Sinnott.
Yeah, is this the type of thing that's come out of the FCM that comes out of a different organization? I mean, I know that I've been receiving some emails warning us about, international mandates coming down. And I'm sure Director Wally would have looked into this before doing anything to such. But natural asset management, it just looks like a huge chunk to bite off for staff to get into this. So I'm not sure whether we're starting a process that we might regret later. Can I just get some comment from staff on this?
Well, staff can't. I don't have many comment because we had a delegation on natural asset management at EASC about a month ago, I believe, and this resolution came from the directors at the end of that. So this isn't a, let's say, staff-inspired motion, but maybe one of the other EA directors can speak to it.
Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair. The motion came about from basically the area directors wanting some more information. So we're not committing to anything right now. The presentation was quite compelling, and I think it's just an opportunity of exploring a little bit more before we make any decisions. Some of the things that tweaked my interest with it was, they talk about stormwater management, and I happen to have a feasibility study on that. So those are the kinds of things that I'm looking to get some more information on. Thank you.
Right. Anyone else? All in favor? Oh, sorry, Director Sinnott, did you put your hand up?
Yes, I did. Thank you. And it goes back to my original concern at the committee of the whole and the further talking about grant policy and seeking funding and the whole 9 yards in terms of where does this lead us at the end? before we start going down to ask for more money to do another project, where does this lead us? I would rather defer this until I get more information in terms of what does this mean at the end? Like, how much money are we going to seek? And what does that mean to staff capacity and objectives? Because I'm not seeing anything in here that would answer those basic questions that I sort of set out in the proposed policy on grant applications. And I would like to at least have that in hand from staff before we move forward with an unknown like this.
Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to the conversation about natural asset management, this is something that I first learned about when I attended the Local Government Leadership Academy earlier this year. And it's something which municipalities and electoral areas are using and incorporating into their official community plans. The town of Gibsons on the Sunshine Coast was a really early adopter of it, realizing that their aquifer that they counted on for the water that feeds their town needed to go through 9 jurisdictions before it got to them, and understanding how important that aquifer was to their community. And for me, natural assets are something, and I think for all of the electoral areas, could be something that could be included in official community plans and things like that. And really the first step would be to talk more and learn more, and then potentially there would be inventories that were done. There's a series of steps, and I encouraged you to go back to the YouTube and listen to the Electoral Area Services Committee of earlier this month, because we had a 10-minute delegation, which was quite informative. Thanks, Chair.
Director Senate.
Yeah, thank you. This reminds me of Mr. Koopman's emergency management planning sort of questions that he had, like how big will this get? Do we have to do geotech assessments of the entire region to determine where the risks can fall? I think this could lead us to a massive amount of work, and I'm just asking that this now be deferred. So I'll vote against the B and C as well, and ask that we come back with a further report setting out the objectives and how it fits with our strategic planning and the likely consequences. But, we'll see how the vote goes. Thanks.
Director Lanyon.
Yeah, I'll vote against B. I wouldn't necessarily vote against C because I don't know enough. and so I think C is an opportunity to actually learn about it before we initiate an action to get some funding. So I think B is out of order. It should come after C, and it should come at a future meeting. Once we're more informed. I actually did watch that EASC meeting myself. So I am familiar with it, but I could see how a person who didn't watch that meeting would have no idea.
Okay. On B, further discussion? All in favor?
If I may, Chair, I was just going to say, I don't recall at EASC us making that motion to look for funding. So perhaps it was the thought of staff that it might help. Maybe staff could speak to that.
Well, the motion is that staff apply for funding through the FCM communities to assist with natural asset management. So that was the motion.
Oh, it was, okay.
Vonish and Rice, so.
Okay, so B, all in favor? Opposed? No, 5 opposed, 6 opposed. You got Director Lanyon, Director Dahl, Director Senate, Director Kerr, Director Colburn, Director Baker.
Seven opposed.
7 opposed, so is it defeated? Okay, thank you. C, that the regional district schedule individual meetings with Roy Brook of the Natural Assets Initiative for electrical.
Mr. Chair, if you're going to put that motion on the floor, I'd like to move something just slightly different. I'd like to move the regional district schedule. I move that the regional district schedule individual meetings with Roy Brook of Natural Assets Initiative for electoral areas B, C, and D. And staff.
Second.
Okay. Director Colburn?
and I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but I'd also be interested in, I know that the last motion didn't pass, but if the intent is to be applying for funding afterward, that a report come back to the board about possible complications, outcomes, deliverables, those kinds of things. Because if that's going to come back to us here, I'd like to have that information in that report after those meetings happen, if the intent is to go for funding.
Sure, Mr. Chair, if I can just chime in here, one of the challenges projecting forward with Director Sinnott's motion that the CO do this, that, and the other is that you have motions that are not inspired by the CAO or staff. So to answer those questions, I don't have them. It wasn't a staff report with the recommendation. So if you want those, I think that information has to come from the director because I don't have them. So I think you're putting expectation on staff that I can't fulfill. So.
Director Von Esch, then Director Sinnott.
I had a question. My understanding was that in order for C to move forward here, we did need some funding and to start engaging with the Natural Assets Initiative. I'm wondering if staff can clarify on that.
Well, I listened to the presentation like the other EA directors, and you can't do anything for no money. And there was a cost to do some asset management inventory there, and I believe he recommended that a source of that could be FCM. I believe I could be wrong. So it's likely that's where the motion came from.
Okay, Director Sinnott.
So what I'm hearing is that we've got an item on the agenda that is not led by staff, for which the CAO is responsible for the operational outcomes of the organization. We don't know whether this is an actual activity for staff to do, is tied to our strategic priorities and or within staff capacity, or what the possible consequences are to the SRDs. Is that what I heard? Is that this is, because it's driven by an EA committee, that this is outside staff's control to provide that information to the board as a whole?
Well, not by committee, by a director. I mean, any director is entitled to make a motion, which is instruction to staff, and if the board supports it, then we're directed to do that. There's been already 6 or 7 reports that were director report inspired with motions on them that this board just passed today. So we've just done that. There was no there's no connection to long-term outcomes, strategic plan. We have the ability for directors to provide directors' reports. They can, and often do, have resolutions, and if the board supports that, then that's our direction. So this is not much different than a director's report, I'd say, and other than we had a delegation, it inspired a motion by directors, and it's before you. So that's not unusual. That any director can make a motion.
Thank you for that information. And I would say to the board as a whole, as a matter of our own discipline, that we keep in mind our strategic objectives and make sure that what we're doing in prioritizing staff to carry out is in alignment. And possibly if these come up individually, we might have to have a policy on our own behavior in terms of bringing these forward and ensuring they are connected, and explain how they impact staff capacity before we consider these. Now, just based on what you've just told me, I'm going to vote against any further activity, but I will make a motion that we come back with a report, potentially by staff or by the director himself, that addresses those issues. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Director Lanyon?
So thank you for pointing out the previous motions. I don't know if this is the right forum, but I know we've got some intentions to do a housing service, maybe look at getting some progress in that direction. And I feel like we're getting weighed down in things that are taking us a little bit off course with some of our core deliverables in our strategic plan. I don't know if staff's able to comment and say whether that is a true observation or not. It's probably a hard one to answer.
Kinda. I mean, what I'll do is take my liberty to prioritize those things of, we can have, and we've had half a dozen today, director's reports with motions on them. Director Mawhinney asked on timelines on one of them. Can I bring it by the end of the year? Maybe, maybe not. If I do, great. If I don't, I'll say to her, I'm prioritizing, strategic items of the board maybe before that. I'm just making up that example, Director Mawhinney. But I'll take some liberty of what is, how much time something's going to take, the priority of the board, and maybe, associated timelines or how urgent the matter is, and I'll make that judgment myself. So I want the board to know that I think I'm aware of priorities of the board, and no matter how deep the stack is, they'll just get buried in the stack and they'll get addressed as time allows for it. So, the stack can go as high as it can, but you're only going to work from the top down. And so if and when, I don't think it often happens, but let's say directors would say, hey, where is that? Well, maybe individually they do to me. I say, well, we're getting to that, but I've got these other things that the board prioritizes. So I take that liberty if that helps answer your question.
Yeah, so this is hearkening back to a number of months ago. I got visibly angry at the amount of, I don't know, I'll call it EA business that is swamping the agenda at times, not always. I could sense a bit of relief in staff in that, I think the workload is piling up, and I would just like an honest assessment of how many backlogged projects have we got. Because we need to either kill some of those things or stop adding new ones till the old stuff is dealt with. So how are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a fair question. I just say that the stack gets deeper. You can make it as deep as you want, and individual directors. And I'm going to say I think it's been fairly decent when everyone might have their own pet project to say, well, that's just a little bit lower down the list. It's going to take some time. So. I don't, I just think there needs to be the appreciation for that, and I think the expectation level, I would say, is pretty reasonable amongst a group of knowing that, okay, just today, there's 6 or 7 directors' reports with resolutions on them, and some of them will likely take longer than they may hope or wish they would, but I think there's a reasonable understanding, and unless there is, let's say that the frustration level amongst some directors gets to the point where you're not getting to this quick enough, then that's where I'd push back and say, okay, well, if that's going to be your attitude, let's start chopping them from the list, because I don't want to be personally said, you're not getting to this and I keep speaking to it. I'm happy with the board giving me the liberty to address those as resources are available, and I think that has been successful. But when and if a director comes and says, you're just not getting to these things, then I would push back and come to the board and say, okay, time to chop, because I don't want to be identified as the person not getting things done that are not possible to get done on that timeline. I will say that date hasn't come yet, but if it does, I'll certainly push back, because you make the stack 10 miles high, it doesn't matter to me. Just set your expectation levels on timing of certain things. And I think the group has been reasonable in terms of that. But if that changes, I'll be the first to come to you.
So out of 100%, what capacity level are we currently running at? Consumption of capacity?
Well, it's always going to be, not always, but it typically is over 100%. So that's where the timing of issues is. There's a lot of items that don't get, you just look at the budget, how many projects, how long they take, and that's just a result of how deep the stack is. So there's generally always more than 100% there, but they sit in waiting.
Director Wally, then Director Sinnott.
Yeah, I just want to point out that quite a few of the projects that come from electoral areas just involve planning staff, which municipalities don't pay for. Doesn't affect your time, doesn't affect anybody else's time. And you also got to remember there's lots of resolutions that come from Municipal Services Committee that electoral areas probably wish didn't, and there'll probably some that come